Hey y'all, I'm Heather and welcome to my channel, The Debt Free Quilter. Today, it's finally time to start talking about quilt math. And I'm not talking about how much everything costs. No. I am talking about making everything fit together in the right size. So, first, let's get a few questions out there, okay? It's how did I know I would have to adjust the size of my background pieces? Well, we remember these little bitty blocks. Well, they came out smaller than they were supposed to. So I knew going into the finishing that I was going to have to make the block, these pieces here, all this gray, I was going to have to make it a little bit bigger. So I did. I realized that since my blocks were small, I was going to have to increase sizes somewhere. So how did I do that? I knew I could either put a larger frame around the exterior of the blocks, or I could increase the sizes here, which I did, and it came out really nice. And in the end, I went with the option to increase my sizes and increase the size of the overall block about 1/4 inch. So instead of 8 3/4, I wind up with 9-inch blocks, which is fine by me. Now, how did I decide on the sizes for the background cuts? Well, I used quilt math and I used trial and error. I knew that in some cases, let's face it, most cases, I would need to increase the size of my background pieces. And I knew what the block size was supposed to be. Didn't turn out that way, but I knew what it was supposed to be. So I knew how much I would need to increase my sizes. Up to 1/2 inch in most cases. So that's what I did. Now, why did I decide to make my blocks 9 inches instead of the 8 3/4? Well, let's face it, I have plenty of this gray fabric left. I'm talking, I have yardage left at this point. And I decided because I decided to use one background, yes, I'm looking at notes over here. Because I decided to just use one background, which was honestly the cheaper option, it was easier to just cut my sizes bigger because I have a ton of it left and not worry about it anymore. Okay. Now, let's get to the nitty-gritty. Okay? These pieces here are the main ones that I increased. These got increased by 1/4 to about 1/4 inch as well. This one stayed the same because it goes with these. So I needed it to go with this and this one to be the same size as these. So that left me increasing these pieces and these pieces on the frame. Now, I do not have my notes to give you those sizes right this minute, but just know that everything equaled out and I have a 9-inch unfinished block with all of these. Now, here's our next one. This is frame B. This one I left alone because it needed to be the same size as this. And then I increased these sizes of, I believe, these 3. I don't think I increased that one. I might have. But like I said, these are just an example. And they did, again, go up a minimum of 1/2 inch per piece. Some maybe more than that. All right, here is our C frame. Again, this piece over here stayed the same. This piece here was increased. This piece here was increased, as well as these two. And it took me a minute to get some of the sizes right. It did. And if you find your blocks are coming out smaller too, like mine did, it's perfectly fine to increase the size or not. You can always just add a frame around the exterior of the block, and that's fine. You could even add in sashing. It's your quilt. You do what you feel like doing. Now, for our last one, frame D, here's our flying geese. Let's see. I needed to make sure I had enough where I have two of this piece, so these two are the same size. But as you can see, this one I've pressed towards this piece here. But these two are the same size. Again, they are increased maybe 1/4 of an inch on this one, and then this was increased about 1/2 an inch, as well as were these two. So we have gotten through all of that. Now the fun part is I will be choosing these at random which frame I want to go with. Either the geese, the patchwork, or the half square triangles. So that is what is going to make this absolutely fun, is I'm going to choose at random from the rest of this stack of blocks what frame I want to go with them. Now, some of them may be a little influenced by the backs, because some of them are pretty heavily seamed. There are some that aren't, but there are some that have got a lot of seams, and that has to be taken into account into which frame I use. As you can see, this one has got some pretty good seams on it, and I have to take into account what I'm going to use so that I can press accordingly. Now that part can be a little bit scary, but you know, in the end, it's supposed to be fun. Just keep that in mind. It's supposed to be fun. If it's not fun, it's not worth doing. So now it's time to get to the sewing. But first, I'm going to show you the cutting in time lapse, and I hope you all enjoy it. But we'll get to the sewing in this video. This may be a little bit longer video, but again, I'll do most of the sewing in time lapse. But I will show you how to connect all the dots and get everything put together for each frame, and I hope y'all enjoy it. We'll see you at the end. Alright, let's get started with our frame A blocks. The first thing we do is lay out all of our pieces in the same order that the block goes in an exploded fashion where everything's got a little bit of space, and then we start sewing everything together. To build this block, we first have to add the piece that matches the block itself the closest, and then working outward from there. Now we all know how much I like batch sewing, so I'm adding some of the smaller pieces to the frame pieces, which will make things go a little faster in the end. Time to do some pressing and get these laid back out. Now it's time to add the second piece to the top of our main block unit. There's going to be a lot of pressing in this video, guys, so I will try to make it quick, so let's get these pressed. Now it's time for a little bit of cleanup. So we're going to trim these blocks to where there's nothing hanging off the edge, where they're nice and square before we add our next pieces. Alright, time to add our actual frame pieces to the block. Let's get going. As you can see, I brought my pins out for this portion. I had a small bit of distortion due to bias in the frames, so the pins help keep it straight and flat so it's not getting any more distortion. And once again, it's time to press. This time we have to make sure we're pressing toward the background squares so that we don't have any extra bulk in those frames. Let's add the next piece in our frames. And we've pressed again, and now it is time to sew on the rest of the frame unit, the exterior background pieces, after we do a little bit more trimming. So in adding the exterior pieces, we are adding the side pieces first, and then we will add the top and bottom pieces to the frame. Of course, with pressing in the middle. Let's see how well these frame A pieces came out, shall we? Now it's time to get started on frame B. Just like with frame A, we're working from our main small block out, starting with one of the side pieces and moving forward from there. Let's get these pressed, shall we? Time to add the next pieces of our background. And more pressing. This time we're adding the small piece onto our actual frame unit once again. And let's press that out. Now we're going to square up our block just a little bit, get any little excess that's hanging off the edges off before we add our frame piece. Alright, I brought my pins out again for the same reason as the last time. There's a little bit of distortion from the bias, so we want to get that taken care of so everything stays flat. Now that we have them sewn on, let's get them pressed and see how they turned out. Now it's time for frame C. Let's get started. Once again, we're laying out this block and getting everything ready to sew up. Alright, I'm going to start by sewing the main frame piece to the small piece that is attached to it. Next, I'm going to add the side pieces to the main small block unit. Alright, let's press all these out and move forward. The next step will be adding the sashing units to the larger units that we've just finished pressing. Let's press these one more time before we join the two halves of our block. Time to add our halves together and make a whole block. I don't know about y'all, but all this pressing is starting to wear me out. But here we go, we're getting closer to the end. I know y'all didn't think we were done. We've got to clean up at least that one edge over there. It looks kind of wonky. Alright y'all, home stretch, last frame, let's go. Once again, we're starting with our main small block and adding the side pieces to flush that out with our background. I did not win bobbin chicken today. And now we're adding the smaller piece to our flying geese unit. Let's get all this pressed. Now it's time to add in our sashing pieces.
Time to press again. Alright, let's sew our last two halves for our small blocks and frames. More pressing. We can never get away from the pressing, so let's just get it done. And now finally, for the last little bit of trimming, just square everything up, make it look nice, make sure most of the sides are straight, and we'll be done with our small blocks.
Okay. We have finally finished these small blocks and their frames. Finally. And I'm very glad that we're done. So now we can move on to the medium frames. Yay! And I am sorry for the delay in getting this video out. Between being sick, having sick minions, and my minions being on spring break, it's been kind of crazy. So we're finished with these. We're going to move on to the medium-sized blocks. That means we're going to be talking more quilt math. And we'll catch you in the next video. Have a great day. Have a great week. Bye.